Well, an infamous 5-year-old rape case is back in the news this week after the victim came forward. For years, she was known by the pseudonym Emily Doe, but now she wants people to know her real name because she says her identity had been lost. Chanel Miller's story raises a decades-old debate over whether news organizations should protect the identity of sexual assault victims because anonymity can have unintended consequences. It was January 2015 on the campus of Stanford University when Brock Turner raped an unconscious young woman behind a set of dumpsters. He was caught in the act and convicted, but served just 3 months in jail.
The former Stanford swimmer hustling through the gauntlet of reporters.
While Brock Turner became well known, his victim was reduced to this.
Emily Doe, who was passed out drunk behind a dumpster.
That Emily Doe has now come forward in a 60 Minutes interview, which airs just before her book comes out later this month.
In newspapers, my name was Unconscious, Intoxicated Woman.
Her book is Know My Name, and her name is Chanel Miller.
I had to force myself to relearn my real name, my identity, to relearn that this is not all that I am.
While Chanel Miller chose to reveal her identity, naming rape victims is an old conundrum for the media. One-time Des Moines Register editor Geneva Overholser first raised the issue back in the 80s. And it came up recently in the case of St. Paul Prep School senior Owen Labrie, who was accused of raping a freshman girl.
Should the victim be identified?
Well, that, of course, is the ultimate question.
Her name was protected. But after Labrie's conviction on a lesser charge, Chessie Prout came forward.
It's been 2 years now since the whole ordeal, and I feel ready to stand up and own what happened to me.
The media always names the accused, almost never the accuser. But that nagging anonymity can also taint an accuser's image, something Chanel Miller felt happened to her.
My name was Unconscious, Intoxicated Woman.
And now it's Chanel Miller. I mean, I do believe it should be up to the victim to decide, but I think we've created this aura in the media where we expect them not to want to identify themselves, and we feel we're very protective of them. And, you know, every other line in the newspaper is we don't identify victims, but this is what it gets reduced to. Chessie Prout, I mean, she basically said the same exact thing as Chanel Miller, that they felt like they had been reduced to this obscure, 15-year-old girl lying half naked. And, you have all these images instead of an image that conjures up a real person. I mean, if you read that victim impact statement that Chanel Miller, and I mean, it's graphic and specific and just chilling. And she's got all that in the book. She wants people to know, as did Chessie Prout. And I just think that we in the media should make it clearer to people that they can identify themselves if they want to. It's not up to the legal system. It's up to them. And I think there's this assumption that it should be secret.
And I think that they did self-identify, and that is their choice. For 36 years I was in the news business. We never named, as a matter of course, rape victims unless there were very specific circumstances. I can only recount a few cases. And I always had mixed feelings about it, because on the one hand, you do want to protect victims, and on the other hand, by not saying their names, you perpetuate the stigma of being a victim of rape, of this crime. So I always felt mixed about it. I don't know the answer, but I think society right now is asking that we not name them unless they want to identify themselves.
It also creates an unlevel playing field, because there's a presumption of guilt if you're naming one person and not the other.
Yes.
I guess it's my turn. I'm not clear on whether either of these young women, my sense is that they did not say that they wished they had been identified by name when the coverage first began, right? So that's a really important point. They're not saying shame on the press for reducing me to this from the outset. They're saying this is what happened over the course of time.
And to be clear, Chessie Prout was a minor when hers occurred. It was a little different situation.
I don't see anything wrong with news outlets saying, as a matter of policy, we do not identify alleged victims unless they express a willingness to be identified. I think that would be totally appropriate. And as for it creating an unlevel playing field, that's a concern, but this is a unique kind of alleged victim. So I personally don't have a problem with the press.
No, I'm just saying that we've created an atmosphere where we sort of insist that you don't.
Maybe. I mean, we don't, as far as I know, there's no polling data, for example, showing, we spoke with 200 victims of sexual assault, and this number said that they wish they had been identified.
Maybe we'll do that.
That would be interesting.
I don't think that the media led on the idea that we're not going to identify victims of sexual assault. I think that it just kind of grew up organically out of the social mores surrounding the issue, and it is too bad that victims are stigmatized by this, but to a certain extent we have to reflect those social mores. Maybe it will change over time. One other aspect to naming victims that we haven't talked about is it would if it became routine, fewer victims may come forward to report what happened to them.
Well,
they
say they don't come forward as it is.
Well, no, that's true, and I think you might have even fewer if you had a situation where
we don't know.
People would. Well, no, we don't know, but it seems logical to assume.
I just want to say that stigmatizing does not occur just because you don't come forward. It also occurs if you do come forward, because of the nature of the crime. So, it's a very different crime from other ones. So, for me personally, I'm happy for the victim not to be identified. I do think, as journalists, we can ask the victim, as we know, we're going to write stories about this because of the circumstances. Do you wish to be identified? Now, that was what Geneva Overholser, brought out from that victim all those many years ago. There's nothing to stop us from there. The only thing that I would change now, because we have a pattern, which I believe is appropriate, of not naming female victims, I think it should be all rape victims. I think that's where we are, and that we should not mention the names of all rape victims. I don't know that. Well, I'm just saying I don't know that that's a policy everywhere. I'm articulating. I think that that's what should happen, and I have to underscore Adam's beginning point, which is that at the time, the two of them did not wish to be identified. I wrote a commentary about Chanel, and I didn't know her name then at the time, and the horrificness of what happened to her. You have to understand the emotional and the physical tied to the emotional debilitation that those young women were enduring. They were not prepared in that. I don't believe they were to take on what it would have meant to be identified. So I'm happy for her now to write her book, to tell the story, to be as articulate as she's been about that in the past, but I don't think she could have handled it before, and I certainly wouldn't have wanted to have been the journalist who put that out there.
But she is saying that she hated what she was reduced to.
I understand.
In hindsight, I wonder if she wishes she had.
Well, I think this is something that we can continue to talk about in newsrooms, but for me right now, the nature of this crime is something different.